Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Community Heroes. My name is Raheema Caratella, and you have an hour with myself and my guest, and today we'll be discussing bereavement. So, we understand that the death of a loved one can be devastating. Bereavement affects people in different ways. There's no right or wrong way to feel. And today we'll be exploring some of the issues around bereavement. We'll be exploring some of the issues around burial and how it's affected you. But also, I sort of want to conclude my session by talking about some of the services that are available out there in the community that can support you while you're going through grief and bereavement. So I think my guest has just arrived, and I am going to share the link to my show. So just bear with me. Right. Go. I'm live. So if so I'll just start by saying Assalamu alaikum again, and also I wanted to say Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Now this is something. This is a dua. It's a part of a verse of the Quran which translates to "We belong to Allah, and to Allah we shall return." And this is the phrase that is most commonly used when a person experiences tragedy in life. And we normally say this when we hear news of someone's passing. And inshallah, I just wanted to start by remembering Allah and saying that our life and our death is in Allah's hands. And you have to give yourself time. You can go through 100 different emotions when you experience loss. And today we'll be discussing some of that, as mentioned, with my guests. Now, we're not going to look too much into the Islamic funeral rites. However, I am curious to hear about people's experiences of the janaza, the salah, or going to the graveyard, especially some of our female listeners. What have their experiences been of visiting the graveyard, as well as attending a janaza or being at the cemetery, and what kind of feelings that's invoked for them. Now, as Muslims, we believe in the inevitability of death. And, that's our death is the beginning of our journey to the hereafter, which is, of course, everlasting. Death must therefore be accepted and dealt with in a dignified manner according to the rulings of Islamic Sharia. So we're going to further explore some of that. Now, with Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, Sadaf.
Welcome, Raheema. Thank you for having me today.
No problem. Jazakallah for coming. I was just talking to our listeners and explaining to them that today we're going to be talking about bereavement. Very happy to see you. Jazakallah for coming. It has. It has. Now, me and Sadaf used to work together at the Shama Women's Centre on the Bereavement to Achievement project. So I've got so many questions because I want to hear about where the project's at,
Sure.
what it's doing. But I was just introducing loss to our listeners. I started by saying inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, to say everything, we belong to Allah, we return to Allah.
Absolutely.
And, loss can affect anyone, Muslims, non-Muslims, young, old. You could be losing a child, you could be losing a grandparent, a neighbor. And I was just also mentioning that death for us is a journey of our new life in the hereafter.
Yeah.
Right? Our bodies go, but our spirits are everlasting.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to touch on the post death like the burial experience in the graveyard and the janaza, and if anyone has any stories about the experiences with registrars or coroners, it'd be interesting to hear that as
Absolutely.
well. But most importantly, I think if we talk about loss and how that affects people, because it, as mentioned, it can affect people in lots of different ways. And so if I could introduce you, Sadaf.
Okay. Thank you, Raheema, for inviting me today and talking about loss. As you quite rightly said, loss is something, or grief or bereavement is something everybody goes through, irregardless of your race, your ethnicity, your background, etc. And yes, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Sadaf Akhtar. I've been working on the Bereavement to Achievement project for a while now, alongside Raheema. It's lovely to see her again. And I've been working in counselling for some time now, particularly with harder to reach communities who struggle with a variety of mental health issues. As we know, it's a very taboo area. But in terms of bereavement, I think that it's very important to understand that everybody suffers loss in some capacity, whether it's, when we look at loss generally, loss of health, loss of finance can be traumatic, the loss of our identity, especially for Muslims today, we're questioned about who we are and identity today. That's a loss. And the breakdown of a family is a loss. But in terms of bereavement, I think that it's something that touches everybody, whether it's directly. Everybody who's listening today knows somebody that's passed away, whether it's not too far back or quite recently. We hear about it on the news. We're affected by loss on a global scale, and we hear about people who've been killed in different, whether it's a natural disaster or something traumatic. We hear about it and we're affected by it, and the way we deal with loss in that way in itself is interesting as well. In terms of loss, when clients access counselling, for example, what I'd like to do is actually explain the process of loss cycle, because I think that's really, really important, Raheema, as you know yourself. And the reason why we explain the different stages of loss is because we try to take away, demystify the taboo of mental health. Now, if you think about it, people go into depression. We all suffer from depression. We all suffer from anxiety, whether we are the most pious Muslims or we are moderate or whatever. So we have to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us perfectly imperfect. If we were perfect, we wouldn't have any problems and we'd carry on in life. But in order for us to gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tests us immensely. And one of the ways He tests us, we know in the Quran, He tests us with our health, with our wealth and our family. And that is through loss as well.
Yeah.
So what we try to do initially, when I sit with a client in that safe space, what we try to do first of all is explain that counselling, I mean, how many of you actually understand what counselling means? First of all, I want to say...
Yeah, because there's different types of counselling that you can get.
Absolutely, There's so many different types.
What type of counselling
Okay, so there's
do you provide?
Right, okay, so... Quite rightly, Raheema, there's lots of different types of counselling out there depending on the modality or the discipline of counselling. That means what method of counselling are you using? For me, I'm a person-centred counsellor, so I tend to be looking at the person as a whole and looking at where we are now in the present and how we move forward with that. In terms of grief or any other issues that are affecting anxiety, depression. There are also some counsellors who might follow a psychodynamic approach, which is looking more into the past and looking at things like attachment theory. I'm sorry, viewers, if this is kind of going out above your head, but you can always Google that attachment theory, which is more Freudian. It's more based on his theory of psychodynamic and attachment approach. There's also now people use short-term methods of coping with anxiety, depression through loss with CBT, which is cognitive behavioural therapy. The NHS tend to use that a lot. It's got its pros it's got its cons, as has every modality.
Yeah.
Doesn't suit everybody. So the way in which I work is more person-centered. Sometimes I tap into psychodynamics. Sometimes I implement CBT.
Yeah.
Depending on the client, depends what their needs are.
Yeah. Well, you've mentioned a little bit about your project. Now, if I could just ask, what stands out about your project and the counselling that you offer compared to traditional therapies or through other sort of national organisations? How do you make sure that your service is person-centred and supportive of the women in this area?
Right. Okay, it's a good question, Raheema. We are a unique service because, for a variety of reasons, you can access generally counselling through your GP, through Open Minds, through the NHS, through IAP services. But what makes us unique is that it's a culturally sensitive approach towards counselling. We're working with, what we have to understand, we're working with hard-to-reach communities who would not normally access counselling support.
Yeah.
So we offer the therapists on the program, for example, we have an understanding of Eastern values, of identity issues, of cultural issues, and we also understand the Western framework of delivering counselling. So we have the best of both.
Yeah, so you can really make sure that the service you provide is tailored to people's cultural sensitivities and needs, as well as their Western perspective on life.
Yeah, absolutely, Raheema. And I think what happens sometimes, we have clients who've accessed counselling through the GPs. Yeah. And what they found is the GP doesn't quite, the counsellor based at the GP practice doesn't quite understand, if they're not from a maybe BME background, some counsellors may not understand, for example, grief in a cultural perspective, mass grief. They may not understand honour, and they may not understand the dynamics of an Asian family, for example, or an African family, or an Afro-Caribbean family, who have all different ways of dealing with grief. So they tend to look for a more unique service like the Shamma Women's Centre Bereavement Project.
Just wondering, listeners, if any of you have received bereavement counselling before, whether it's through Shamma or through the other agencies that are out there, if you want to text in anonymously to share about your experiences, that would be really helpful, because it's always good to engage with our viewers so we know what you're thinking.
Absolutely.
Just had a message from Salma Manzoor to say very interesting and important topic. Well done, ladies. So
thank you, Salma. I think that's a really it's nice to hear, and we all have to work together at tackling issues affecting our communities, and these are very sensitive issues, especially dealing with bereavement. We have to tackle it in a very sensitive and culturally sensitive manner, and a culturally competent manner as well, and that's something that I suppose we're quite good at. Also, for example, we looked at why the service is unique, the Bereavement to Achievement project at the Shamma Women's Centre, because, for example, in a Western society, the proximity rules are different. For example, within South, I've had clients who are maybe the older generation, ladies in their 60s or early 70s, and they talk about how the grief sits in their body in different ways. And what they might say, I had one lady who talked about how her hands used to hurt a lot, and she wanted me to touch her hand, and obviously it's part of counselling. We generally don't touch people because obviously it's without. Yes, it is. It is. It can be,
or what it seems to be as.
Absolutely, but because of what we have to understand, that might be applicable in the West in understanding proximity rules. That means how close we go to someone. But within the South Asian community, an older lady wanting someone to touch her hand is part of her healing process. So I touched her hand, and that kind of gave her permission to talk about and cry and really talk about the bereavement that she was affected with 30 years prior to that. So she held that in herself for so long.
Gosh, so it's alhamdulillah, the fact that people can still be grieving, many years after their loss, and something could have just recently triggered that emotion within them as well. So just going back to getting in touch with us at the studio, our telephone line for the Ramadan special on Eva 102.5 FM is 0116 212 9324 if you want to call in. If you want to text in, our number is 07450 925 084. You can listen to us on www.ramadan.fm or send an email to info@ramadan.fm. So thank you for your message. We've had a message come in to say, I completely agree. As a youth worker, I feel whenever a young person is referred to counselling, sometimes the counsellor is not very culturally competent. Let's take Islam, for example. Some counsellors don't even know the importance of Ramadan.
I think that's a really important point there, and I totally agree with the viewer for sending that comment in. It is a challenge. There are lots of challenges, and we have to have a more culturally competent approach to therapy, to dealing with the youth, to dealing with the older generation. And it's not about ticking boxes to say, I've attended a workshop on culture. It's about changing the way we work in the workplace, changing the way we understand, being open to difference and respecting it. It's about agreeing to disagree as well. But you're absolutely right. For example, Ramadan, the importance of Ramadan, how it's a spiritual exercise, how how do these things impact the client or the individual who's using the service, whether it's a youth service or any other community organisation. I think people just think it's about asking questions. And I think if people from non-BME backgrounds felt more confident to ask, they'd be surprised to see how happy people from BME backgrounds would be to share their culture and be happy to talk about it.
So yeah, I'd say definitely when you've been to see your GP or other NHS services and they send you that text to say, can we get some feedback from you about your recent visit? Do mention these things to say, actually, I felt like, my there were certain elements that could be addressed.
Absolutely. Would you like me to talk a little bit about the actual process of loss, what happens, or the challenges, Raheema? What would you like me to?
I think if we start with some of the challenges, especially within our communities, because we've already mentioned that there's a real taboo around grieving. So at at Sharma, at the centre, is your service still a women's only service, or have you introduced family counselling?
Right. Okay, that's a good point. Initially, and Raheema knows when she was initially on the project, and she had a big vital part to play there with the befriending service. Yes, initially we just actually delivered sessions to women. But what we found is after the 2-year pilot of the project, of the service, we found that women were saying, what about men? What about our brothers? Our brothers would like to access counselling. And I thought this was a milestone, actually, because talking within our South Asian communities or sometimes in all other BME communities is not encouraged. You've got to have that stiff upper lip and carry on and keep your problems in, but you actually don't. So what we've done is also we offer counselling for men, but what we do, we offer it at a local, we hire a room in another organisation and we deliver one-to-one sessions that way. Also, what we've also done, Raheema, we now offer family counselling.
Oh, okay.
So we've had, so for example, I've had a client, obviously because of the confidential nature, I can only give very little details, but I've had two clients, a father and mother who've come in because their son committed suicide and they were and they had no, he didn't leave a note or anything like that. So they really could not understand how this could have happened, and they blamed themselves a lot. So my job there was to hold that space for them, provide that safe and confidential environment for them to talk about what was on their mind and the guilt they felt and the anger they felt towards other organisations who had not spotted it, the teachers who had not spotted it, and things like that when he was younger.
Because people want to try and, when the grief is such, when the grief just comes so suddenly, the loss comes suddenly, people do want to try and unpick and unpack, the moments leading up to it, what's happened, was it me, is there anything I could have done to stop it? People do question themselves.
Yes.
So does the counselling help
Right.
help to bring closure to some of those questions?
Right, so sometimes there's counselling can benefit in many, many different ways. Sometimes it's a place for people to vent off all that pain and all that emotional, physical symptoms, mental anguish that they suffer because of their loss. So what the therapist does, the counsellor does, is provide that safe place for them with no judgment. That's really important. Initially, when we see the client, we do explain that confidentiality and privacy is our utmost priority. And what we say, what we talk about within these four walls stays within these four walls, regardless of who we know mutually, if we happen to know someone mutually.
And Leicester is such a place
Absolutely,
that, you know,
absolutely.
you could have met that person in a whole range of...
Absolutely, Raheema, and but I do, because of that, we sign a client contract as well, so they understand that the priority is the confidentiality and the privacy. And so sometimes that space is a really good safe space for families or individuals to talk about their loss and find closure on certain things. Sometimes it's a space just for me to hold them there, because it depends on where they are in the process of loss, in the stages of loss as well. But either way, it's extremely beneficial as well, because they don't know me. I don't know them. There's no conflict of interest. And we have something, I do something which is called having UPR, unconditional positive regard. That means there is no judgment on the person. Whatever they tell me, I'm not there to judge them in any way.
Yeah.
And that is something that counselling is about, and that is the ethical framework of counselling. So people, if anybody's out there and thinking, you know what, I don't want to go to counselling, they may judge me. Not at all. I don't.
So it's a confidential,
absolutely,
non-judgmental service that you're going to be receiving wherever you go.
Wherever you go. And remember, you can always ask the counsellor, the therapist, many questions. So it's part of our training as well. And also from a human perspective, as a Muslim, I'm not there to judge anybody. Yeah. Who am I to judge anyone? Yeah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ultimate judge. Yeah. So we are there, and I see myself as a tool or an instrument to help people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts in my path.
Right, so in terms of supporting these individuals through their counselling sessions, how many sessions can people get through your service, or what would you say is the right amount for people to have in terms of therapy before they're feeling a little better?
That's a really good question, and it's interesting because I have clients who come in and say, when will I be better? When will I feel better? And I have to be very honest with them and say, well, let's see, how long is a piece of string? It varies. For some people who access counselling 2 to 3 months, they feel naturally themselves, I feel like I'm moving forward now. So they'll start with weekly sessions, and then perhaps we'll push it to fortnightly, then monthly. So there's this transition period where we don't just stop, we ease off that counselling, so they begin to stand on their own 2 feet. But at the same time, there might be clients that I've had for a year and a half. So it's always about the client. It's about what they need and what they require. It's not about me. I'm there to facilitate that space for them, and for some people it takes longer. But what we do, we assess regularly to see, how do you feel counselling is helping you? Do you feel you'd like to spread the sessions? And when I start assessing and seeing that the individual is beginning to reinvest in their life again,
so you will be able to see the telltale signs of somebody who's now, adjusting and moving on with their lives. Absolutely.
If you want, I can explain a little bit about the process of loss, or I can do. Would you like me to briefly mention that?
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about the process of loss.
Okay. So when a client comes in, they're often, there's lots of different stages. They'll initially, not necessarily when a client comes in, when we're affected by a loss or a bereavement, a person may go into shock or disbelief. And that can often lead somebody going into denial. If you think about yourself and think about where you felt predominantly stuck, or when somebody's passed away, if you look at the family members around you, everybody's going to be at different stages, and sometimes the arguments happen, sometimes people are at different stages, and we feel that everybody should follow the same type of grief. Not necessarily. It's normal. People go into denial, or they fall into guilt, feeling guilty, the things they should have said, they could have said, and they could have done, the should have, and then blame as well. People blame each other, or blame themselves, or blame organizations or, for what's happened, the loss that they're suffering. Some people go into anger and some people go into depression and sadness. So that's why you'll see a variety of people acting different ways.
Yeah, and some of our viewers might be sat there who may also be suffering loss at this time, thinking, actually, I'm in one of those stages myself.
Yes.
And at the end of our towards the end of our show, I will talk specifically about services that are out there, as well as the Shama Women's Centre services. So just a quick reminder, if you want to join us on the web, it's www.ramadan.fm. If you want to send a text into the show, 07450 925084. Thank you to everyone who's listening in, and on the Ramadan special on Eva FM 102.5. So, Sadaf, you've explained to us briefly about the process of loss, the denial, the guilt that people may be feeling, the anger that resonates with them. Why is this happening to me? And do you find that the majority of your clients that come in here, you might find them at different stages of this loss? So one time you could see a client that may be feeling so angry and so bitter about their loss, and another time they'll come in and they'll be at a completely different phase. So how do you work with that?
So what happens is people fluctuate. So on this process of stages of loss, people might be come in with blame and be feeling very guilty, and we'll work through that. And then sometimes they may go into denial or anger. It depends. They fluctuate. This is not a it doesn't. It's
it's not a one size fits all approach.
One size fits all approach. So what we do, the counselling enables a client to start experiencing the pain in a safe place. Learning to live the reality of pain. So counselling provides that place of how do I, that void that's gone with the person that I love, the counselling, we begin to fill that void with the memories and the good, memories of the person they've lost. Acceptance is a really big thing. That's when a big change happens, Raheema. Acceptance of the loss.
So what kinds of things would you encourage your clients to do to gain acceptance?
Right. So what we do, we work upon, we look at how people are feeling in terms of blame. For example, they accept the loss because they come to terms with the guilt. They come to terms with the blame. They come to terms with the fact that it's okay to start enjoying the sun again, or enjoying friendship, or enjoying their families again. So when they start to reinvest in their lives again, they accept the loss that they've incurred and say it's okay. They give themselves permission. So we do a lot of work, and it naturally happens when they start coming to counselling. They naturally begin to accept that it's okay, it's happened now. The reality sinks in and it hits them in terms of that loss.
Jazakallah. Just checking on some messages, signposting services. It's good to know about different services aware of us. Thank you for educating everyone. Thank you for your messages. Keep tuned in. We'll be going to an ad break in a couple of minutes, but before then, I just wanted to touch on what as part of the Shama Women's Centre and the services that you offer apart from counselling. I know that I was myself involved in the Befriender support service, and actually I've just come from the hospital. I went for an X-ray, and there was a lady who was there. With an elderly, sort of 80-plus lady who had also come in for an X-ray, and I said, is it sure? Are you taking your mum in next? And she said, oh no, this is not my mum. This is my neighbour's friend actually, and 84-year-old Doris actually. And I said, so you don't have a relationship, as in you're not related to her? And she said, no, I've just befriended her for many years now, and I cook her dinner and I take her out, and she lost her husband, and so I was there for her through that. And I think having a befriender is really important, or having someone there for you. to take you to the shops or to just go out for a coffee with to talk about your loss? And how did the Befriender
Right.
service become intertwined within this project, and
Okay.
and where did the need come from?
Okay. So again, that's another good question. In terms of the Befriender project, what we found was when you access the project, you can have counselling, but at the same time, to tackle the isolation and loneliness that a client may be suffering. For example, some of them may not have the support of their families. Maybe they don't have anyone around them because they've lost the person that was everything to them. So, as Raheema knows, the Befriending is a service where we match the client's needs. For example, they may need somebody to go out for a coffee with them, go for a walk, go to town, and begin to kind of a social interaction there. And we match people, befrienders who are trained individuals who suffered a bereavement themselves with these individuals and enable them to tackle isolation together and give them some comfort and friendship. And Raheema knows as well, they often forge lifelong relationships as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, which is beautiful to see. It's lovely.
Right, we'll be heading out for a short ad break, and we'll be back with you after our break. Thank you, Sadaf.
You're welcome, Raheema.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining us again on the Ramadan special on Ava 102.5 FM. Welcome back, listeners. If you want to, today we're discussing bereavement and we want to hear from you. And as our listeners, we want to get some feedback on how the show's going and if bereavement's affected you recently, if you have a coping mechanism or something that's helped you, or services that you've accessed that have helped you overcome your bereavement, then we'd love to hear from you. So we've just received a message to say a topic very close to my heart. I'm so proud of you ladies taking the courage of being live on radio talking about it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all, from Mariam Osman. Thank you so much for your message. We have an anonymous message that's come in to say this is a very good subject, but the doctors don't refer you but give you a number. But the time of someone to speak to you after 6 weeks, how can one help yourself going down into depression? So it sounds like, as I lost 6 family members, including my nan and dad, in less than 8 weeks. So really, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. So really sorry to hear for your loss there. So what you're saying is that there can be a real delay in the GP referring you for services. So how once you get to the point where you're brave enough to actually reach the doctors and speak to the GP, from then on, how can you then ensure that you get that support and you get it quickly where you need it?
And again, really sorry to hear about your losses, and to have such a traumatic experience in terms of losing so many family members in such a short time
period.
Must be absolutely, horrific for you and your loved ones as well. But yes, there are different methods of accessing support. Through your doctors, you can go, they might refer you through Open Minds, which is a counselling service, or you can go directly to Open Minds and do a self-referral.
So just thinking, actually, Sadaf,
Yeah.
because we're a national radio station and we're live across the country, would this process be replicated for anywhere?
It should be, yes, absolutely.
I know we're talking about Leicester services, but so we might have listeners out there.
Yeah.
Okay,
Open Minds is national. It's part of the NHS. It's part of IAPT services, which are psychological therapy services. So yes, so it provides assessments and treatments for common mental health illnesses and bereavement. It's a tiered approach. There's lots of different types of. You might just go in for anxiety, depression, or you may access the counselling support. It depends on the assessment that's conducted.
So our producer is going to post the link to the Leicester Open Mind services, but as mentioned, they are regional services across.
Yes, it should be national, actually. And in terms of the waiting lists, generally, if you access counselling through other organisations and the NHS, unfortunately, the waiting lists are really long. An individual can be waiting from a year to a year and a half, and it's quite shocking. Whereas at the Shamma Women's Centre, alhamdulillah, our waiting list is roughly 6 to 8 weeks.
Right.
So, and there's 3 of us on the team who are counsellors and psychotherapists. Though it's a small service, it's a very robust and professional service. So we do tend to get referrals actually from other organisations.
Right, okay, because they probably also have waiting lists. So
yes.
What is your waiting time?
Okay, 6 to 8 weeks roughly, Raheema. And
do you take people from outside of Leicester, or is it, do you have to live in Leicester, the city, the county, to access your service?
Leicester or Leicestershire, because due to the funding of the project, at the moment the remit is within Leicester or Leicestershire. We never know about the future, but at the moment it's within Leicestershire.
Do you work with any national organisations like you partner up with or anything?
Well, we have a really good link with the public health and the local CCG, the Clinical Commissioning Group. We've been described by the NHS as inspirational, and we've been quoted for our work in befriending, in counselling and offering that support, and having such a robust professional service which is culturally sensitive and culturally tailored. So we have support from, for example, the event we had on Friday. We had Ivan Brown, the Director of Public Health, who endorsed and commended our project. We had Professor Azhar Faruqi, who's the chair of the Leicester Clinical Commissioning Group. We had Sandip Binning, who's the CEO of the Laura Centre, who's played a supportive role in providing clinical supervision to myself and the other counsellors, and training as well. We've had a lot of support from statutory bodies, and grassroots organisations. So it's took a while to build our reputation, but we often have referrals through word of mouth as well now, Raheema.
That's really good to hear. We've had a couple of messages in regards to either resources that are available to talk about death of a loved one from an Islamic perspective, to give to young children. So I don't know if you would be aware of that. Also, any other books that you recommend reading?
Right. Okay. So that's a really good question, and it is something that we need to talk about, and not just sort of, if we think back about when we were children and we had a funeral. I remember one of my first experiences finding it very kept to one side, and then just seeing your loved one in a coffin. It's quite traumatizing, and in order to, we have to talk more about this. But I think that's definitely a gap in the market where we need to write more about this. Perhaps one day I'll write something on that, helping children with loss and bereavement from an Islamic perspective as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think there needs to be more out there, and we also kind of wanted to touch on other services that are available out there. Just before the end of the show, we've got just less than 15 minutes, so I just wanted to refer to some other services out there. So as mentioned, the Shama Women's Centre, you offer the bereavement counselling support services, and do you still offer the therapeutic services?
Yes,
so the holistic services like massage and...
Absolutely. So what we do, we offer for women at the moment, because our therapist only works with women.
Yeah.
So they have counselling, they'll have the holistic therapies, which is a body massage or Indian head massage, and that helps with the physical symptoms of grief.
Yeah.
They have befriending, they have information, advice and guidance to help them with their CV, look for work, perhaps
move on in their lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and other courses they can take to help build their confidence again.
And is that a free service that you're offering?
Absolutely.
So there's no cost to receive?
Absolutely not. It's fully funded. So please, listeners out there, take advantage of our free services out there. All you need to do if you want to refer is perhaps call us up or go to our website.
So I have the telephone number.
Yeah.
The telephone number for the Shama Women's Centre is 0116 251 4747, and you can go on to that waiting list, and hopefully you'll be seen within 6 to 8 weeks as a rough guide. But in the meantime, would they be able to access any of the other services, so the information, advice and guidance, or some of the courses that you offer, or do they need to have had their initial referral with you first?
Well, if they've had a bereavement, they'd come through the bereavement service and access those services. But if they want to just access the job club, they can do so. If they want to just access, become a volunteer perhaps on some of the programs we run, they can do that separately without the bereavement element as well. So.
Great.
Yeah.
That sounds good. We also have an organisation in Leicester called the Laura Centre. Now, the Laura Centre opened in 1991, and it offers specialist support and bereavement counselling to parents whose child has passed away, and also to siblings as well. So if you have suffered a bereavement and you'd like to get support from the Laura Centre, they have a wide range of support as well. Their telephone number is 0116 254 4341. And another organisation that supports individuals in Leicester is the Cruise Bereavement Care. Their telephone number is 0116 288 4119. And it's a national charity for bereaved people in England, Wales, and they support people in Northern Ireland also. And they offer support, advice, information and guidance to children, young people and adults when either someone is in end of life care or when someone has passed away. And they offer face-to-face telephone support email and website support. They have national services and a website. They've got helpline, telephone helpline as well. And there's the national number is 0808 808 1677. I just also kind of wanted to say that, you know, when you've suffered a bereavement, and one of the points that I wanted to leave the show highlighting is that once you've had a bereavement, you know, don't isolate yourself. You know, try to surround yourself with people and family and friends who can help you get the support that you need. And definitely I encourage you all to, if you feel that you need support, further support, then do contact some of these agencies out there to support you with your loss.
So Raheema, I've had a question come through on my text as one of my contacts on my phone, but I'm really sorry that I don't know who it is because it's on my Fitbit, so I've just read a brief version of your message. Somebody asked about how do we access counselling or acknowledge anxiety and depression if our culture or our kind of holds us back in terms of not accepting that that depression and anxiety exists. I think that's a really, really important question, and this is why myself and other people working in the mental health profession or counselling or psychotherapy, we have to start tackling mental health taboo. Of course there's things such as depression. Of course there is. You know, we were not created as angels. We were not the malaika who have free will to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are humans who are created perfectly imperfect, and part of that, being depressed does not mean you're weak. Was the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam never sad when his son passed away? Was he not allowed to cry? Yes, he did cry. He dropped a few tears because he felt the emotion and the loss. So that is an example. If he was an example to us, the best of all creations, then we have to understand that we are humans. We are spiritual beings experiencing life in a human body. So therefore, we must be in touch with our emotions. We must acknowledge and not miss the signs of depression. The world we live in, we are faced with so many issues. We're not allowed to be sad. We're not allowed to cry. Why are we not allowed to do these things? You're human. So please, you know, if somebody in your family is suffering or struggling, please don't sit and be a bystander. Take help. It doesn't mean they are not. I have so many clients who come to me who are alimas as well, and they've said to me, I'm not allowed to access counselling because I'm told there's no such thing as depression, which is really sad. And I work really hard to say it's normal, it's part of being human. We're not contradicting Islam. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says we must look after ourselves and appreciate the body.
Internal and
absolutely,
external.
Raheema.
Yeah.
Not just the physical listeners, it's the emotional. We're not just a physical body. Who nurtures the spiritual side? We have to keep ourselves spiritually strong. So therefore it means looking after our mental and emotional well-being. Unfortunately, for example, in the South Asian community, the word there's no word really for depression, or for example, if somebody's feeling mental health, the only word I can think of, and I spoke to other people, is pagal. Why is it such a derogatory term? You're a lunatic, or you're crazy. You're not damag ke bimari, you're pagal hai, you're pagal hai. Sorry for those who don't speak Urdu or Hindi, but I'm just giving you an example. Why don't we, you know, a word such as zain ka bimari, you know, an illness of the mind, or dil ka bimari, for example, but that no such word exists within our vocabulary, unfortunately, and that shows how embedded mental health taboo is, and accessing and understanding that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says we should also look after our mental health, our emotional health, and let's all work together at helping each other in that.
Definitely. Thank you for your
You're
question.
welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
Again, we're here to answer any more questions that you might have. Our text line is 07450925084, and you are tuned in to a Ramadan special on Ava 102.5 FM. So if you know, we're happy to answer any more questions. Let me ask my producer if any more questions have come in. No, we've not had any more questions come in. Just thank you for your feedback on the Facebook Live.
I think we've had lots of comments, really positive comments, Raheema, and it's wonderful. And we all have to work together on this and have that conversation, have that difficult conversation. You know, if your child is suffering with anxiety, depression, don't ignore it, acknowledge it. You know, if your wife or your husband or your mother, acknowledge it and help them. Self-care is really, really important as well.
Yeah, and I feel like, within the Islamic tradition, you might have the iddat period, and then, post iddat, people just don't know what to do with themselves. So, accessing community services and getting out there back into the community really will help.
Absolutely, Raheema.
And no one should be on their own. And,
No.
If there's one thing that you can take away from this show is that there's a wealth of organizations out there to support you. And, you can never be alone in Leicester. We're such a lovely family, and we have organizations for everything that can support you, and specifically in bereavement. And, at the start of my show, I mentioned that people deal with grief in lots of different ways. You can just be tired, you can be overwhelmed with sadness. And, Sadaf mentioned about the different stages of loss, about, first, coming to the terms with the fact that loss is real, that, you may have real pain that you're experiencing. You have to adjust to life without the person who's passed away, and there's a massive emotional energy that happens when you're grieving, and also you need that energy to help you move on, and moving on is what our show has been about. We've talked about different organizations that can support you, as well as you may find yourself somewhere in that circle of processing your loss. And I would say to all of our listeners that please do get the support that you need from the services all around. So is there anything else that you wanted to specifically mention about? We've talked about some of the taboos of counselling. We've said that your counselling is now both for men, women and families. That's offered at your services. We've mentioned about the befriending therapies, the information, advice and guidance, and the holistic therapies that you can get at the Sharma Women's Centre. Is there anything from the counselling perspective that people that help people to move on,
right,
that you want to just talk about, or have you just had another text come in?
Okay, what I want to mention is the importance of self-care within this process. I want the listeners just to take this thought away. What do you do for self-care? I'm not talking about cooking and cleaning. I'm not talking about taking your wife out to do the shopping. What do you do for you? What within your busy lifestyle, within your the dynamics of your family, being a husband or a wife or a daughter or a sister or a friend, what do you do for yourself? Now, it's really important that you make time for yourself, because it depends on how much you value yourself and how much self-worth you have. You deserve that time for you. So get to know yourself, because in order to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need to know ourselves. So for that reason, I imply you to really get to know yourselves, or start that journey. Islam teaches us that from a spiritual perspective. Get to know yourself, and you may know your Lord. So think about that, listeners. How much time do you invest in yourself? How much do you love yourself to make that time for yourself?
And only when you start to love yourself and show yourself that self-care, can you then start to come out of such a thing as grief, isn't it?
Absolutely, Raheema. That's part of it as well. So I want to say thank you for the opportunity.
No problem.
For inviting me in today.
Jazakallah for coming in, Sadaf. And is there any other final words that you want to just share with us?
I think if we all work together, we're here to help each other. We have, as Muslims, we have so many issues that we're affected with. We're affected by our identity. Are we British? Are we Muslim? We are Muslim, we are British. We also, culturally, we might be Indian, Gujarati, we might be African, Turkish. How do we maintain our balance of who we are? And that will only be by seeking that closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and remember that Islam is a way of life, and that no one will judge you except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's really, really important. You shouldn't care what other people think. I'll leave you one last thought. What other people think of you is none of your business. I'll say that again. What other people think about you and say about you is none of your business, because those words belong to them, even if they're about you. What is important is what you feel about yourself and think about yourself. I'll leave you with that.
So, Jazakallah for coming in and being my special guest today. So I've really learnt a lot from you. And, you know, if there's that last message that we can leave people with, to say, love yourself. Don't think about what, you know, others think of you. Just think about improving yourself and building your relationship with Allah. And, you know, in time, once you've adjusted to your loss, inshallah, you will have the capacity to move on. Inna Allahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Jazakallah for joining me on my show. Assalamu alaikum.